It was a great weekend to be a fan of the University of North Carolina. The Tar Heels go into Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium, and take down the South Carolina Gamecocks by a score of 31-37. We got a lot to talk about in the second episode of Talkin Heels. I'm your host, Nick Delahanty. To my side is my co-host, Jordan Game Day Falls. Jordan, you get that name because you were featured on TV during game day. How's it going?
It's going great, man. Yeah, we were on TV quite a bit. It seems like my phone was blowing up Saturday morning during college game day, and we had blast.
It was funny because when I was watching college game day, I'm like, where's Waldo? But instead it was, where's Jordan? So it was a lot of fun watching you there and seeing the atmosphere. And of course, I'm going to try to pick your brain on that as we could talk more about this game as a whole. But a lot of headlines surrounding the Tar Heels after that one. Carolina's defense was the storyline in this one. Give me your take from being there. How was the atmosphere at Charlotte?
Absolutely. And we talked last week. What was the first thing we were looking for watching at home or at the game? And my take was the defense, how they looked the first few drives of the game. And that first drive at 3-and-out, first play of the game, Elijah Hussey sniffs out what looked like to be a trick play from South Carolina. And that kind of set the tone for the game and for the night for the Tar Heel defense. And it really mattered with those tackles for losses and things like that. Atmosphere in Charlotte was wonderful. Unfortunately for the Tar Heels, we were outnumbered in the fan base. South Carolina definitely felt like a Gamecock home game. But the Tar Heels avoided that and played through that pressure.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about it on our first episode, and I said, do not give South Carolina the ball to start the game. Well, I was wrong because the defense came out and they put together a really nice opening drive to get Drake May and company on the field. And the Tar Heels, what did they do? They responded with 7 points. It was such a turn of events. And I don't know about you, but for me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, this defense looks a lot better than it did a year ago. I know it's only one series, but hey, they're getting pass rush. They're making life difficult for Spencer Rattler. And they got off the field and now gave some comfort to Drake May where he's looking at it saying, I don't have to do it all.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it was scary in the stadium. It had to be scary at home at third down on the first drive for South Carolina. Spencer Rattler had him wrapped up. He escapes. Nothing but green grass. And he found a pretty much open receiver. And again, Elijah Hussey, we're going to talk about him a lot. He made a great play on the ball to break up a pass and create that third down. But or the fourth and 3-and-out. But other than that, other than missing a few tackles here and there, they on the first tackle they wrapped up and got the Gamecock offensive player on the ground.
And now, before we get deeper into this game, it's important to note that just an hour before game time, a couple of key injury notes hit for the Tar Heels. Nate McCollum was seen on the sideline not warming up with the receivers. He was out. So that left the Tar Heels without Tez Walker and McCollum for this one. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball. DeAndre Boykins, who was listed as a starting corner for this team, was found to be out for the season. He was on crutches. They made it seem like he wasn't even there. At that point, when you heard about that at the stadium, what was going through your mind? Because for me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a long night.
Yeah, it wasn't very positive from the Tar Heel fan base that knew about the injuries. Some of the people already in the stadium, obviously, maybe not great cell service or things like that. They probably didn't know at that point. But if you're sitting at home, you're pretty worried. Down your top two receivers and you're starting nickelback, or as the Tar Heels call him, the star on the defensive side of the ball. That gave some worry to Carolina fans. The good news is that you have Drake May, and he knows how to spread the ball around. So we saw that Saturday night, finding 9 different targets without his top 2 receivers. So hopefully McCollum gets back here soon, but that was worrisome on Saturday night.
Now let's talk about the offense for a minute. First drive, they go right down the field. It was a beautiful drive. First drive under Chip Lindsey, we saw a lot of different things. They ran a little wildcat where they were about to before South Carolina timeout. It seemed like they were throwing a little bit of everything at the Gamecocks trying to catch them off guard. What did you think overall about how the offense looked in this one?
Yeah, it looked great. Actually had a somewhat of a running game. We didn't really know what to expect with the running game. We talked about this last week in episode 1 was, is it going to be 5 guys spread out? Is it going to be 4? Turned out it was only 2. British Brooks and Omarion Hampton, which was one of your key players of the game last week, was really important in this. Both of them pretty much split the carries 50-50. I think Brooks had 15 and Hampton had 16. And so that obviously took the pressure off of Drake May, especially being down his top 2 targets. When you can run the football, it makes things a lot easier on everybody, and that really helped.
Yeah, what a great storyline for British Brooks. 611 days, you wrote about it on Keeping It Heel. What a story for him to come back and put together a performance like that, especially on the same field that he played his last game on.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw post game with him an emotional moment with Matt Brown, and you could tell he's just happy to be back. And he performed like he's happy to be back too. He came in and made was very impactful for sure for the Tar Heel offense.
Now, I think that we could both agree on this. One of the players that we were a little surprised not to see was their leading rusher last year, Elijah Green. Something seems to tell me that that might be a common situation if these two guys in Hampton and Brooks continue to run the ball at an efficient pace.
Yeah, for sure. It was kind of surprising early. But then when you start to think about it and look into it, if you have two guys that are really going and have their momentum and are in a rhythm, you don't want to take them out of that. So you kind of get that development of a dynamic duo. And if that's Brooks and Hampton, maybe it resembles a little bit of Javonte and Michael Carter from a few years ago. But obviously that's a high standard to meet. But you want something of that nature. You don't want to have 4 guys trying to combine for 200 yards rushing when you can have 2 doing it and getting in a rhythm.
Absolutely. And Brooks might not be the leading rusher every single week. It might be Hampton who has the better week. But overall, if you could get that production from 2 or 3 of those guys, that's all you really need, especially with the caliber you have at Drake May at quarterback. Now, let's look at the receivers. Couple of iffy situations. Gavin Blackwell had a pretty tough game. He did make a nice play in that third quarter, but 2 very brutal drops. What were your takes on the wide receiver core?
Thought outside the drops, the wide receivers were okay. 4th and 2, Blackwell May puts the ball perfectly in his hands that would have been first down and could have led to a touchdown. If nothing else, you're getting 3 points out of that drive. Got to catch that ball, and that's probably just a product of not a lot of chemistry between May and Blackwell. If it not seeing time with the first string, things like that. Again, the McCollum news slid Blackwell into that role. So something that just has to be dealt with, and hopefully they can get better throughout the year. And then the 3rd and long, Blackwell drops a pass that likely will have been first down. He had a lot of open space and could have likely scored a touchdown. Tar Heels had to settle for 3 on that drive. So despite some mistakes, the Tar Heel offense was able to still put points on the board, but score, and the defense was able to step up for us. Outside Blackwell, getting the tight ends involved. Kobe Paysor with a big catch for a touchdown. May looked a little rusty through 2 picks. We're not used to seeing that. We expect him to be Superman. Luckily, he didn't have to be.
Now, going to Blackwell, I think that the one thing that Tar Heel fans should take from this is that this kid's got a lot of talent, because if Drake May didn't have confidence in him, he wouldn't have targeted him after the first drop. And he did. He went right back to him, and he kept going to him, which goes to show me that if May trusts him, we have to trust him. It's going to come around. He's too talented to not let it happen. The play that really stood out to me, of course, the 4th down drop, but on the interception, May made a bad decision. I'm not taking anything away from that, but Blackwell could have made a play on that ball. Like, act like a corner a little bit. It's kind of like he stood there, was just like, I'll let him catch the ball. Other than that, I think the rust is going to come off. I think he's going to be fine. Paysor had a couple of big plays. I think that as long as McCollum and Walker are out, he's going to get more looks. And like you said, May is a guy who is not afraid to throw the ball and take chances, and sometimes that results in interceptions. The NFL scouts watching that game, I think, are saying to themselves, you know what? He's a guy that we're willing to take those risks. He thinks he can make that throw. He's confident enough to take that throw. And yeah, you want to protect the ball. You want to be smarter with it. But the way Drake May was operating out of the backfield, some of these crazy looking Patrick Mahomes type of throws. For the most part, he had a really good night. The 2 interceptions really overshadowed that because that first half he was essentially flawless. Second half, they started to take a little more risks. They didn't pan out. But with Drake May under center, you might see those pan out over the season.
Yeah, and we mentioned Patrick Mahomes, and it might seem absurd to compare him to Mahomes at the moment, but he made some Mahomes-esque throws. He had one where he scrambled around the pocket, threw across his body, and hit Nesbitt for a first down on 3rd and 7, I think. And even the interception to Black that was intended for Blackwell, he did throw across his body, but like you said, Blackwell's got to become a defender, come back to the ball, and that's a play. We have to remember, he lost his top 2 targets from last year, Josh Downs and Antoine Green, who are both in the NFL. Last year, he was making those throws, and those guys were making a play on those balls, either catching them or at least breaking them up. And then his other interception, the Cody Paysor, was in the traffic a little bit, but Paysor bobbled it. He's got to catch that ball. And that just comes with time, and these guys have to get used to the way May's throwing the ball to them and things like that. That's a develop for sure.
And think about this, too. As a young receiver, when you have a quarterback that can make things happen when the pocket breaks down, you never know what to expect. I felt like some of the throws that I almost called them Mahomes that May made in that game, it kind of felt like the receivers were like, what the heck is going on here? How'd he throw that? The touchdown to Koppenhauer in the end zone was he just threw that ball up and was like, you know what? Yeah, here it is. Like somebody's got to be there type of thing, and made the play. He makes some miraculous plays. I think as a receiver, it kind of wakes you up a little bit, saying you're never truly out of the play. You got to be alert at all times.
Yeah, that play to John Copenhagen for sure was wonderful. If you go back and watch the film on that, and we saw in the stand a little bit, I kind of noticed it. South Carolina was showing blitz. May saw that. He slid his protection. He knew who the free guy was and drifted away from the blitz to at least give himself a chance to make that play. And he didn't take a sack. That's another thing. The offensive line didn't give him a sack all night. And part of that May throwing the ball away, but they kept May clean. And that was one of our keys to the game last week as well was the offensive line had to win the battle in the trenches.
And Willie Lampkin in his first game as a Tar Heel looked really good. He might arguably be their best offensive lineman. He looked really good in that game, and I feel like that was such a big boost to have, not allowing any sacks like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think Lampkin's going to be by far, by the end of the year, he'll be the best offensive lineman. He had a few middle mistakes where he missed a linebacker or missed a block, but that's just an adjustment period that's going to come with playing at a faster speed of football than what he's used to at Coastal Carolina.
So if you had to grade the Tar Heels offense in this one, now, of course, no McCollum, no Walker, what would you give them grade-wise?
I'm going to give the Tar Heel offense a B this week. I feel like they missed on some opportunities. The 2 drops by Blackwell hurt. Obviously, May's miscues, things like that. This was a situation where this game could have been a lot worse than what it was for South Carolina. It very well could have been 42 or 45-17, and instead, it was only 31. But with the defense showing up, they didn't need to score that many.
Fortunately,
last year they might would have needed to.
You're 100% right about that. The pressure wasn't on to have to do that. I have to agree with you. I have to give them a B as well. You know, you mentioned the Blackwell drops, the couple of turnovers, the inefficiency in those 4th down scenarios that Blackwell dropped. They didn't kick a field goal, which I thought could have been costly on the one drive. Then the thing that puzzled a lot of people, they had the timeouts left toward the end of the half. South Carolina had the punt, and no timeout was taken. I thought that would have been a great situation to give Drake May the ball and say, you know what, go get us some points, especially how the narrative wrote out where South Carolina onside kicked to start the half.
Yeah, and that was something that, I mean, with the clock running with like a minute to go, and we're all the Carolina fans in our section were like, timeout, like, wow, like questioning why we not. I mean, you had the best quarterback in the country, or arguably the best quarterback in the country, and you had 3 timeouts. We've given the ball on the 20 with 2 with a minute left. Is that a product of Chip Lindsey maybe not wanting to be as aggressive as maybe Phil Longo would have been last year, potentially? Or it could just been new offense, new system, down your top 2 weapons. Let's not be too aggressive right here. And I can see both sides of it, but it definitely felt like in the moment they should have taken advantage of getting the ball with a minute left and trying to go score.
Now, let's talk about the defense. They're getting a lot of love this week. Last year, as a whole, they had 17 sacks in 14 games. In week 1, they sacked Spencer Rattler 9 times. 9. That's not a mishap. That's not me lying to you. That's 9 times they got to the quarterback. What did you notice being there in the crowd about how the defense was moving?
The pressure they were creating was amazing. The schemes, it looked like Gene Chiswick's finally got a scheme that works for him and works for the talent on this team. They brought in some talent via recruiting and the transfer portal. Amari Gaynor is one of them that made a big impact. Had 2 sacks on Saturday, 2 of those 9 on Saturday night, and that was very impressive. Just part of it was coverage stats too. Sometimes there was just nobody open, but for the most part, they got pressure on Rattler from the get-go. And the other thing, when they got to him, they wrapped him up. And that's one thing that last year you saw a lot of could have been sacks or would have been sacks, and the quarterback would have escaped. Feel like they got Rattler, he was going down.
And you look at it, and you look at the box score, and you see that it wasn't just one guy. Cedric Gray was involved. Amari Gaynor was involved. Evans was involved. Bo Atkinson only saw 15 snaps. He had a sack. They were 9 to 10 deep on that defensive line. They were getting pressure after pressure after pressure. And you could tell that Rattler was looking over at the sideline like, what are we doing here? Is somebody going to protect me? I'm dying out here. It was just such a different feel from a year ago where quarterbacks would sit in the backfield for watching a 30-minute sitcom and then find their open receiver because the secondary broke down.
Yeah, for sure. And it's going to be interesting. We'll find out more as the year goes on naturally, but was it a product of Carolina's defense or defensive line, or is South Carolina's offensive line that bad? And we'll find that out here over the next few weeks for sure as we get into non-conference play and then hand ACC play in a few weeks.
Now, just based on South Carolina alone, heading into App State this week at home, is it a fluke, or do you think this unit has the potential to cause havoc throughout the year?
They had the potential to cause havoc throughout the year, for sure. They showed it. It felt like the DBs were better too, cover sack-wise. Elijah Hussey, we've talked about him. He is a guy that can play almost any position on the field on the defensive side of the ball. When DeAndre Boykins was ruled out pregame, they moved him to star, which is the nickel position, and he played that position really well. They had to bring in a redshirt freshman, Tayon Holloway, to play corner, and you saw the DBs get beat on some jump balls. I think if we clean that up and limit those big plays, the potential's there for this unit to have a drastic 180-degree turnaround from last year.
I have to agree with you. What I saw from Chiswick's defense in that one, number one, they're healthy, which is a big thing in terms of the front seven. You have to be healthy in order to get that pressure. They have guys up front that cause havoc, and I think that even on a decent day, they're not going to sack the quarterback 9 times a game. It's not going to happen. That's like a 1 in a million type of thing. But it's something that, they could get 3 to 4 sacks a game, cause pressure in the backfield, make it difficult for a running game to start. That's what the Tar Heels need. They don't need them to be dominant like that in terms of sacks. They need them to cause pressure, create havoc, which hopefully leads to turnovers. And I think that this unit definitely has it. Again, the 2 touchdown drives were scary. They were 20-22 touchdown drives. That's how ugly they were. And at that point, I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh boy, here we go again. This defense is going to go back to the old form. Like, we can't have anything fun. But they buckled down. And you got to give them credit, because I don't think last year's crew would have settled down like this crew did.
No, and I think the 2 things that popped out or was noticeable, at least in the stadium, was on those 2 touchdown drives was it felt like there was one big play and it just spiraled out of control. Those 2 touchdown drives were initially started, it'd be like 2nd and 10 or 3rd and 10. South Carolina to get a 15-yard first down, and then they'd go hurry up and just chunk play after chunk play. The one thing that seemed they made an adjustment at the half was they didn't let that bother them in the second half. There was a drive. Can't remember exactly when it was, sometime in the late third quarter, early fourth, where it was like 2nd and 17 or 2nd and 27, and South Carolina had a big play that was incomplete pass, and we were called for holding on the defense in the defense secondary. Then the next play, we were called for unnecessary roughness on a tackle, picking the guy up and slamming him down. It just seemed like, and that just started to feel like, oh, here we go again, spiraling out of control. And the defense stepped up. They didn't let it bother them. They fought through adversity, and they held the South Carolina offense to 3 points on that drive, which turned out to ultimately help and make South Carolina score again, which they never did. But last year, those are mistakes, those penalties. That's something that the Tar Heel defense would have said, oh, here we go, let's just let them score. And they didn't do it.
Yeah. One of the big things you always hear in football is bend but don't break, especially on the defensive side of the ball. There was plenty of times where the defense could have broken that one. After the 2 turnovers, they could have just let them score. They could have just, let the momentum take over. They, like that drive you mentioned where they only allowed the 3 points. That could have been 7. A couple of bonehead penalties. The corner thinks he's playing WWE and he can slam the guy. Those things could come back to haunt you. They didn't in this one. And I think that when you're looking at this team and you're looking at the opponent, if it was a team that had no business being on the field with Carolina, you would say, okay, there's room to have some pessimism here and not be totally convinced that it could continue. But let's remember, South Carolina's got a good offense. They have a very good quarterback. Joyner is no fluke. Every time he touched the ball, I had anxiety because I'm like, they're going to run the Wildcat and just let him run all over the field. They have a couple of really good key playmakers that they were able to shut down.
Yeah, and I mean, South Carolina, people's on point saying, "Oh, their offensive line isn't that good," or maybe they didn't have as much talent returning as they thought they did, or during the offseason, the media thought they had. This is a team that beat Tennessee to end the year and Clemson and hung with Notre Dame in the bowl game. They were rolling at the end of last year with Rattler. Joyner is definitely a wild card and can play anywhere on the field. He killed us 2 years ago, and it seemed like the Tar Heel defense went in with mindset that is not happening. We talk about the sacks, tackles for loss, 16 tackles for loss, by the way. 54 a year ago, they had almost 25% of their tackles for loss in one game. Played 14 games last year. We've got 50% of our sacks and 25% of our tackles for loss in one game against an SEC opponent. But the other key stat that stood out was they didn't let South Carolina run the ball. -2 rushing yards on the day. And that is impressive.
Very impressive at that. Now, we graded the offense. What's your grade for the defense?
It's definitely an A+. Or I'm back up. An A. The 2 chunk plays or chunk drives hurt them. But I'm going to give them an A for sure. Definitely impressed.
I'm going to be a little bit harder of a grader here. I'm going to give them a B+. I think that there's still room to grow. I want them to improve. If they're listening, I was thrilled with how you performed. But you could be better. Those 2 touchdown drives you just mentioned, they were ugly. Clean that up, you'll get an A in my book the next game. But overall, final thoughts on the South Carolina game. Met expectations, didn't meet expectations. What were your final thoughts on that?
Met expectations. All they had to do to meet my expectations was win the game, because for years we've just said win a big game. And even though it's non-conference, it has no impact on the overall schedule other than if you're in the playoff hunt at the end of the year. It sets the tone for the season. You're winning a rivalry game with a border battle, and the defense showed up without 2 of your top receivers. It's definitely met my expectations. And before we move on, let's give a shout out to Cameron Rucker when Walter Camp National Player of the Week.
Yeah, Rucker was a big piece in that puzzle, and he really caused a lot of havoc. I'm sure Spencer Rattler is having nightmares about the Tar Heels front 7 after that one. But again, we talk about it a lot in college basketball. You always hear about those resume building wins, and you need those wins. Now, if you're Carolina, and they're not thinking like we are, where we're saying win the ACC and we'll be happy. They're thinking they could compete for the college football playoff. If that's the case, That's the kind of win that you need. That SEC opponent. It holds higher than just playing some random Joe Schmo. So for the Carolina, they're far ways off from that. Obviously, it's only week 1. We're not getting our hopes up. We're not,
Not at all.
thinking ahead here. But in hindsight, you have to think about it. That's a resume building type of win, and you have to be very happy with it and how it played out.
Absolutely. And even if it's not the college football playoff, the highest ranked team goes to the New Year's Six Bowl if you don't win conference championship. So you could also be playing for a New Year's Six Bowl, and if that win helps you move up in the rankings, which we'll find out tomorrow what it did for North Carolina's AP poll ranking, but that could help for sure.
Now, this game is obviously behind us. We're 1 week in. Carolina returns home. They're going to host App State on Saturday afternoon in Chapel Hill. We remember last year, that was a ugly slugfest. 63-61 final. Carolina just barely got out with a win. This year, it's going to look a little bit different. On opening day, App State's quarterback goes down. He has a hand injury. We found out he's going to be out 3 to 4 weeks, which means that their backup is going to start, and that's Joey Aguilar. But again, Carolina's had some trouble with backup quarterbacks, and this guy is coming off a week where he completed 11 of 13 for 174 yards instead of school record for the most touchdown passes in a season opener with 4. Now, what are your thoughts heading into this week against App State?
Yeah, we don't really have a lot on App other than the fact that they beat Gardner-Webb, FCS opponent, 45-24 on Saturday at home. Aguilar, backup quarterback, like you mentioned, he's a transfer from a junior college. 4 touchdowns in his opening game is obviously impressive against anybody. But it's a matter, can Carolina prepare for a backup quarterback? They were unable to do so last year against Georgia Tech, NC State, and Clemson. So it'll be interesting to see what Gene Chizik has dialed up, and can we build on that South Carolina win and the great performance by the defense? Can they build and not get complacent and say, we played well in one game, that's all that matters? They got to build on that, get better. They had a lot of miscues, and clean that stuff up.
I think the guy that they're going to have to worry about is running back Nate Noel. Remember, last year's game, he had 116 yards on the ground. Carolina's defense looks to be better this year. They stopped the run against Joyner, who's a very quality back. They have to do it again this week. And if they do that, it puts the pressure on App State to have to throw the ball. And if we could get the pressure like we did against South Carolina, that's going to be a difficult thing. A lot of the same things remain true from week 1 to week 2, especially given you don't know what App State's going to give you. They're a new-looking team. Bryce is not there no more. We talked about it the other day. We were both very happy about that. But this is a new-looking team, but the same kind of status quo seems to be the thing for Carolina. Come in, stop the run, and force them to have to make bad decisions in the passing game.
Absolutely. The same things do remain true 100%, Nick. You still got to control the line of scrimmage, and you still have to create pressure on the defensive line. And if they can do that, hopefully with a guy that probably was not planning on starting this game coming to Chapel Hill, then Mike can rally him a little bit.
I wish that they had, and no disrespect to Gardner-Webb whatsoever, I don't want to take it that way, but I wish they had a stronger opponent before they played the Tar Heels so you could kind of see a little bit of a kind of preview of what to expect. It's hard to take film off of that game. It really is, whichever way you look at it. But if you're Carolina, the offense, if they protect the ball, they make it a high-scoring affair. App State might not be able to keep up.
Yeah, I don't think that App will be able to keep up if Carolina can make this a high-scoring affair like it was last year. I think the defense isn't going to give up 61 points this year. I just don't see that happening. And it does – it sucks that App didn't play a more high-quality opponent. Gardner-Webb was great at the FCS level. They made the playoffs in 2022, but likely App probably is just more talented and more gifted as we've heard in the past. But it just they likely didn't put a lot on film for the Carolina coaching staff to look at. They're probably keeping things up their sleeve.
And especially with the quarterback change, they weren't expecting to have to play 2 quarterbacks in that game. They really weren't. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, App State might have a few things up their sleeve for the Tar Heels.
Absolutely, and with the quarterback change initially, with Chase Bryce no longer being there, then that's a guy that is talented, very talented. He was at Clemson, at Duke, and then went to App. So how does App's offense change from losing Chase Bryce? Do they have a play or a set that was not designed specifically for him for throws he can make? Can these other guys make those same throws? Maybe they can, and maybe the offense doesn't change much. But if it does change, how do the Tar Heels prepare for App? They prepared well for South Carolina with the new offensive coordinator. See what they do against App.
One thing's for sure. This cannot be a game that the Tar Heels come in like a hangover game. They have to come in ready to go. You can't live off the hype of the South Carolina win. Now it's on to App State.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was something that was discussed by Jones Angel and the Tar Heel Sports Network Saturday night after the game. Was everything that happened Saturday night was exactly what App State wanted to happen. They wanted the Tar Heels to win that game. They wanted it to look that way because now they're hoping that the Tar Heels have this hangover of, hey, we're good. We just be an SEC school. We can roll in here and just let it happen. And that can't be the case. This is an in-state battle. App came to Chapel Hill 4 years ago when this series started with this 3-game series and beat the Tar Heels 34-31 on a blocked field goal at the last minute. So that you can't just expect App to roll in here and roll over.
No, you can't expect them to roll over one bit. I think it's going to be a competitive game. The way I see it playing out, and I want to get your take on this as well. I see this being close early on. I see the two teams kind of trading punches, but I think that ultimately Carolina's defense does what they did on Saturday night. They step up to the occasion, and Drake May and company gets the job done offensively.
Yeah, this is a game that I think we both picked Carolina to win originally in our season preview on keeping it heel, and I don't think nothing changes after seeing game one. I think we're still expecting the Tar Heels to win this by at least 2 possessions. I think I picked them to win by 18, which is what the line is sitting at right now after opening at 13. So I think the Tar Heels win this game. I think it might be App is in-state, is developed into a rivalry. The App State fan base is very excited about this game every year. This is the game this is their Super Bowl. This is the game they want to win. And there will be App State fans in Chapel Hill. They've sold out their ticket allotment. So, but the Tar Heels still have to show up and be ready to play.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They have to be ready to go. Will they make it easy? Definitely not. But I do think that they'll win this game by multiple scores. I just think that the talent and the improved defense is going to prove true. And especially in front of the crowd in Chapel Hill, they won that game in a hostile 80-20 type of South Carolina fan group. It was like a road game. It was really a true road game. So for them, I think that experience is going to help them tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely, that experience last weekend certainly helps. And this one will be a little bit more fan friendly for the Tar Heels. So hopefully, the other thing to be on the lookout for is the App State defense forced 3 turnovers in 8 minutes on Saturday against Gardner-Webb. Again, it's Gardner-Webb, but forcing 3 turnovers is impressive. Drake May can't make the middle mistakes that he made on Saturday night.
Now, will Drake May have his 2 top receivers? McCollum's out with a groin injury. They're saying he's day-to-day. Tez Walker is supposedly having a meeting with the NCAA this week. Do you think that one or both or neither of these receivers will be available on Saturday afternoon?
I think McCollum's will probably be available. If he's day-to-day, they will say he's just out for the week. Maybe not. They didn't tell us about Boykins until an hour to game time, and he had surgery last week. So
yeah, thanks for hiding that, guys.
So maybe McCollum is out and they hide it from App, but Tez has a hearing in front of the NCAA committee, another NCAA committee on Thursday. It's a different committee than what made the original ruling. So maybe he gets a little bit more grace with this committee than what he's had in the past with Charlie Baker and the NCAA. He's still going to practice this week. Same thing we've heard for all of August. They're practicing like he's going to play. Matt Brown's given hints that if his eligibility is denied this week, it may not be over. There could be legal action as the next step. So the Tar Heels are not dropping this. They are not dropping this with the NCAA.
I absolutely love the support for Tez, from Eric Church wearing the jersey at the coin toss to Drake May wearing it backwards during his post-game conference. I love how everybody has just come together in realizing that the NCAA is doing wrong by Tez Walker by not letting him play. You have JT Daniels playing at like his fifth school in 7 years. How come that is accepted, but this situation isn't? Especially given, take the talent off the football field. Let's look at the family and the mental health side of it. The NCAA, and you say it all the time, is saying that they're for the student athletes. If you're for the student athletes, you make the exception here and you let the kid play.
Yeah, and we've seen mental health become a more talked about topic in our society today, and especially since right before COVID and through COVID, we've talked about it. And the NCAA has made a point to have mental health experts and advisors on these college campuses and available for these student athletes to talk about things and try to protect the student athlete as much as possible. And then they're not doing it with Tez. And the NCAA, like you said, people support him. Obviously, I was at the game. I've rewatched the broadcast. Greg McElroy and Sean McDonough, they both pretty much ripped the NCAA on Saturday night on ABC national television. So hopefully the support is finally going to get the NCAA. Maybe not, but they're on full blast from pretty much everybody.
Yeah, everybody's starting to take notice, and I have bad memories of Greg McElroy as the Jets quarterback, but he redeemed himself on Saturday night when he made those comments on the broadcast. Everybody's for Tez. I hope the NCAA sees it, lets this kid play. It was punishment enough he couldn't play in front of his family and his ill grandmother who hasn't been able to see him play. That's punishment enough. Let the kid play. But on that note, the Atlantic Coast Conference is now the All Coast Conference. No, they're really not. But it would be a pretty good name given the fact that they have added 3 teams to the mix. It's finally done. Stanford, SMU, and Cal will all join the conference for the 2024-2025 school year. Now, there was a lot of back and forth. There was 4 teams that were definite no at the first vote. 1 did flip to make this happen. I think we all know who the culprit was there, our little brother. What are your takes on the expansion of the ACC?
Really doesn't make a lot of sense. Other than increasing their member number, it increases revenue a little bit, but not by enough to offset the cost of travel. We're talking about adding 2 schools that are 2,000 plus miles away, and another one that's in Texas. So it takes the members from 14 to 17 for football, and then 15 to 18 for all our sports. Thanks, Notre Dame.
There's a couple of things that I sit here and I think about that don't make sense. Number one, the travel. They were not thinking about the Olympic sports other than football when they made this decision. There was no thought process whatsoever. You mean to tell me, let's use Courtney Banghart and the women's basketball team for a minute. They're going to have to travel to play Stanford during the middle of the week with classes and everything else going on. They didn't think about the student athletes and how it was going to impact them at any point. Also, SMU agreed to join the conference with not taking revenue sharing for 7 years. Is that the type of school you really want?
Yeah, SMU is actually 9 years with no TV revenue.
And that makes it even worse.
Worse.
That makes it even worse.
Cal and Stanford are joining at 30% TV revenue for 7 years. Then in year 8, they get 70%, and in year 9 they get 75% before receiving full revenue in a decade. So these 3 schools are joining at, well, 2 of them are joining at 30% discount rate, and SMU is joining no revenue. If a school is willing to take no money to come to your they're probably not worth adding.
No, not at all. It's not even like makes sense in terms of where they are located. There's no like common sense here. Like it makes no sense to me.
Speaking of the travel for Olympic sports, so it's came out recently that that the ACC is looking at Dallas, Texas as a meeting location for these teams to play games. So you won't even have home games on your college campus for softball or potentially women's basketball against these schools. And the reason is the minimize travel. If you want to minimize travel, maybe don't add schools 2,000 miles away.
First of all, the Dallas idea makes no sense either. Like, why are we playing a conference game on a neutral site?
Right, and we're some of the programs or the sports don't have set schedules, but women's basketball is a good one for the conference. Their conference schedule is Thursday, Sunday, so you play a Thursday game and a Sunday game. So is Courtney Banghart traveling to Stanford on Tuesday to play a Thursday game, and then having to fly back home on Friday to play a Sunday game against NC State? Like, the recovery time is not in the best interest of these student athletes or the fans.
No, and then you think about the time it takes to travel, the time difference. You have to adjust your body to that. It's not fair to anybody involved. This whole thing just is a kind of sign of desperation by the ACC because they're thinking ahead to 2036 when Clemson, Florida State, and Carolina go, you know what, we're out of here. See ya, because we have other options. These schools are going to wait for them. They're not worried about it. But the ACC was worried about getting lost in the shuffle, and that's where this expansion came to be. They said, oh, you know what, let's add, and they spun a wheel. They were like, oh, we'll take these 3 Pac-12 schools. It just doesn't add up to me.
Yeah, and a big driver of adding Stanford and Cal was Notre Dame, who isn't even a football member, and football is the money-making sport that drives the TV revenue. Why did the ACC allow Notre Dame such a large voice? Is it going to help get Notre Dame in as a full-time member later down the road? If it does, the mindset for Florida State, Clemson, and Carolina might change. More TV revenue might come in to allow the offset of what the difference is between the SEC and the Big Ten right now. But if Notre Dame is not joining as a full-time member, there should have been no reason why the ACC should have listened on their opinion of adding Stanford and Cal. By the way, they play Stanford annually as a football game, and they have an agreement with ACC to play 5 schools. So now they're just add Stanford, and it's an account toward their ACC games when they're already playing them.
This whole situation reminds me of like a business meeting where you have your full-time management sitting at the front of the table, and you have your part-time or lower workers toward the end of the table, and that end of the table is deciding what's going on, which should not be. If Notre Dame wants to have such a big voice in this, put up or shut up. Join the conference. You fully join the conference. Stop with this independent garbage. If you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. Stop letting them dictate the situation. And my big question is, why did NC State decide to flip? What was their mindset? Did they think, oh, we're going to go with the cool kids? And then all of a sudden just say, you know what? We're stuck here. Might as well add other teams.
Yeah, with Notre Dame, we'll touch on that first. But this is the second time in 3 years the ACC has given Notre Dame a way out. Once during COVID, they let them join the conference for the year and play in the conference championship game to play games. They should have said, you're not playing unless you join. And then with this situation, again, if it's a deal, and maybe it is and we don't know about it yet, but if it's a deal, if it was a deal where, hey, Cal and Stanford can join if Notre Dame joins, okay, that makes a little bit more sense financially. And then with NC State, it definitely seemed like they were going with Florida State, Clemson, and Carolina to be with the cool kids who are arguably those 3 programs are arguably the 3 most likable and wanted between the Big Ten and SEC at the moment with what's left in realignment. Maybe State thought originally they were going to follow Carolina to wherever Carolina went, and it was going to be a pairing thing. And then State's like, maybe not. And they're like, well, if we can't come with you, then we're just go the opposite way.
Now, let's fast forward here as we kind of wrap up this conference realignment talk. In 2036, what conference will the North Carolina Tar Heels be a part of?
I'm gonna say it happens before 2036. I think the 3 that voted no will find a way out in the next 5 to 7 years. By 2030, I think the Tar Heels are going to head to the SEC, and I'm a little biased. I kind of would like them to stay SEC because it's more regional where I'm located. I can still see some more games, but I feel like it makes a lot of sense as well. the SEC would probably like to add their geographical footprint to North Carolina. They don't have a team in that state yet. It would expand them, and it would make sense basketball-wise. You'd be adding a top-tier basketball program and academic program, so you begin a mix of like a Vanderbilt and Kentucky for basketball and academically. So I'm going to go to the SEC. I'm going to say it happens by 2030.
I'm going to go with the SEC too, and I'm biased. I want the Big Ten so bad because just like you said, it makes sense for me. I'd be able to see a lot more games in my area, but I think that the SEC helps in terms of football because let's face it, if you're an SEC program and you prove you could compete, you're drawing the best talent. You're drawing the best coaches. You're in that mix. I think that Carolina realizes that and they want a piece of that. I think that the longer this lingers, Big Ten basketball is going to make a case that, you know what, it might be the best home for Carolina basketball. But just like you said, the SEC is no slouch. They're also growing as time goes on. I think that the SEC makes too much sense for Carolina to turn it down. And if that offer comes around, I think that that's where they're going to head as well.
Yeah, and obviously realignment has us all confused at the moment, but I'm pretty sure the Big Ten's already at 20 teams starting next year. So I think the SEC still at 16. It would probably, they still got 4 spots to catch up to the Big Ten as far as members go. I think the SEC would be the one to definitely make the push for Carolina.
Maybe we should start renaming these conferences, the Big 20, the All Atlantic Conference, or whatever.
The Pac-2.
The Tupac I saw on Twitter. Yeah, I was dying. Tupac. I'm like, this is great. The Tupac. The death of the Pac-12 is now the Tupac.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So we'll see. Obviously, is this the end of realignment? Probably not. Well, there's probably a lot more to come.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot more to come. And in college athletics, you know that by 2036, when the grant of rights actually expires, there's going to be a lot of different stories we're going to be talking about. The NIL will be well into place, most likely. I'm sure they'll allow a transfer portal every single year at that point. You know, make chaos. The NCAA likes chaos, apparently. Let's just make it happen.
Yeah, make it the Wild Wild West. And let's go back to why the ACC is realigning with Stanford and Cal. And it's because they waited till everybody else did their chose schools, and they're like, oh, well, we don't have nobody to take to the prom, so that's who's left. Like, let's take them. Like, they waited too long.
They're not the prettiest, but hey,
they're not the options, and that was it.
They waited too long, and it came back to bite them. But again, there's going to be a lot to talk about Carolina and what goes on with them. And of course, we hope that you tune into our next couple of episodes where we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We didn't even get into Aaron Matson yet.
Yeah, field hockey sent 3-1 and things like that, and women's soccer has 2 big games this week at South Carolina and Alabama, 2 top 12 ranked opponents.
So you know the deal. We'll be back next week, Wednesday. We'll have a new show released, and we'll give you all those updates, and we'll definitely talk more about it at that point. Jordan, final thoughts here for our second episode.
Football is exciting. It's great to have college football back. Saturday night was fun. I'm still a little hoarse from losing my voice from screaming so much, but App State, Carolina, Saturday, 5:15, ACC Network. Carolina's up to an 18-point favorite, and we'll see if they can they keep the momentum going. That's going to be the ultimate question.
That is the big question at that. My final thought, thank you to the UNC football program for not ruining my Saturday night. I think that is the biggest thing that I could have asked for. You know, summer's wrapping up. It was opening day. Everything seemed to be going against Carolina before the game, and they came out and they played a great football game. Now, don't ruin this Saturday.
Yeah.
That's all.
And we still got, and Matt Brown said, but they were good Saturday night. Now they've said all off season, how do you go from good to great? And it's limiting the middle mistakes. Don't allow those chunk plays. Don't allow missed tackles. Make your blocks. Don't miss your assignments. Things like don't drop passes. And a lot of that should get cleaned up from week 1 to week 2. We'll see what they work on. They're treating this like they lost the game Saturday night, so they're going to improve, and we'll see how they play against App.
I agree. I think they're going to improve, and they just have to do their job. And speaking of jobs, make sure you check out all of our latest updates on Keeping It Heel. We'll be giving you all the latest news and updates on the North Carolina Tar Heels to bridge the gap from now until our next show. Until next time, that's Jordan Falls. I'm Nick Delahanty. We'll talk to you guys really soon. Go Heels.
Go Heels.